The Venus Project, TeamSpeak Seminar, June 12, 2011. Part 2 of 2.
Jacque, can you explain how a resource-based economy is different from Marx's perfect theoretical communism? Marx never I guess it meant fully develop the idea, but in the kind of pure communism, money, class, and government does not exist like a resource-based economy. Can you say that a resource-based economy is actually a pure communism? Go ahead.
Communism was great, maybe 50 years ago or 70 years ago, but it's not radical enough. It doesn't have the details of how to solve these problems. It doesn't have the specific way of making people more cooperative. It was only a theory of social operation, which was never fully developed. That's what's the matter with socialism, communism. On the socialism, the public would own the means of production also. But what happens when machines come in and the working classes no longer work? In other words, that's inevitable in any society. So you cannot design a system and say that's it. You can only design a system in the best way you know how for that time. But you cannot design a system and say this is it. There's no such thing as permanent solutions to anything. Man is constantly changing and evolving. There are no final frontiers. I don't know how else to say that.
Okay, what's your opinion about the human soul and higher spirit?
As far as I'm concerned, if you want a better world, you have to get up off your ass and make it better. Prayer is a cop-out. It's a verbal behavior which does nothing. I don't believe in praying to a higher being because I don't believe there are any higher beings. If there were higher beings, they would be killing each other, people. There'd be guidance continuously. We don't have such guidance. Even Jesus insulted God when he looked up and said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You don't have to tell God that. If God is omnipotent, knows everything, you don't have to tell him your Aunt Minnie is sick. Please help her so she doesn't suffer as much. Like, oh, gee, I didn't know that, and God thanks you for telling him that. Or when the president says, God bless America, who the hell's a president to tell God who to bless? Think about what you're reading. You'll find out that the Bible is written by people and they make God more in the image of people. They can't do anything else. They can't conceive of God. I meet people that talk to God and I say, well, what do you talk about? Do you ask God how to cure cancer, how to cure heart disease? No, they don't. They don't even know what questions to ask.
In terms of spirituality, I don't see anything more spiritual than laying out the methods of how to eliminate crime, poverty, war, hunger, and have a constructive environment. Spirituality today is really a verbal hobby, but the Venus Project's taking all the aspirations of religion and spirituality and turning them into a working reality, laying out a process of how to do that.
I hope that should suffice for you, because if you don't lay out a way of accomplishing that, if you say people have to be kinder, more understanding, decent, and ethical, these are words without the process level. Process levels mean how to accomplish that.
And I don't see how any spiritual aspirations could be achieved within the monetary system either. What makes someone qualified to research the Venus Project? The research to, I'm not sure what
Just
they're
keep asking questions and challenging the ideas we propose. If we design a city and you find shortcomings in it, tell us what the shortcomings are. Tell us what you think won't work, or recommend newer ways of doing things. But just sitting back saying, I don't know if that'll work, is a nothing thing. It's just making sounds. But if you point out the specifics of how to transport people safer, in a better way, with less accidents, we're interested. But if you say things ought to be better, we don't know what you're talking about.
This question is, what is a day in the life of Jacque Fresco?
I understand that.
I know, but I'm reading it to the public right now.
Okay. A day in the life of Fresco is asking a lot of new questions, coming up with new ways of solving problems, putting them to test, checking out the useful aspects of a resource-based economy and the detrimental aspects. For example, if we build a dam, we study all the useful aspects of the dam. And we have another group giving us all the negative aspects of the dam. For example, a dam that holds back water and prevents tributaries from flowing makes it difficult for beavers to build dams because they have no water to flow. It makes it difficult for fish to get back to the spawning grounds because the dams do not have step terraces on the side of the dam so the fish can work their way up to the spawning grounds. When you design a dam, you have to design it for nature, not just the welfare of people. You have to consider animal migration. When you design cities, you must consider that also. You must consider a balanced load economy. The whole system is part of what we need to understand in order to understand humans. We are not separate from nature. We are part of nature. And as long as we don't realize that, we're going to have problems.
I can expand on the day in the life of Jacque. He does a lot of drawings. He does a lot of technical cutaway drawings of different products that he's working on that would be implemented if we had the city going. He works with Andrew at the Venus Project Design. I mean, now Andrew is very involved in setting up the activism teams and everything that's going on with that. But a lot of times Jacque is working with Andrew in describing his different designs that Andrew is animating and will be putting into CAD drawings as well. So we have a lot of meetings going on here with different people that come over as well. Jacque gives lectures for about 5 or 6 hours on Saturday on our tours. He's always very busy and very involved with a lot of different things. We are working on the script as well, working that up, and he's involved in everything that we're doing with making more educational materials available. We are also filming Jacque for about an hour a day on different topics that we are putting out here and making into different products and putting up on our store as well, and putting different sections of that out continuously. Joel Holt is putting that out on our YouTube channel. So we're working on a lot of different things, and he's involved in all of it. How will a non-monetary crimes and violence will be handled in the world of the Venus Project? Non-monetary crimes.
That's only during the transition that you'll have those problems. But during the educational system of the Venus Project, when the children are very young, there's no such thing as a Mickey Mouse Club, and there's no fantasy given to children that have no real basis of events on the physical world. Violence will not be handled because there's no basis for violence. There are no motion pictures about soldiers killing other people. There's no motion pictures about airplanes dropping bombs on cities. There's no violence displayed. So the people tend to reflect their culture. And if you have violence, boxing, feeding Christians to lions, if that's the nature of your culture, you perpetuate those values. We have no such values perpetuated in the Venus Project. There's no boxing, no people punching each other to amuse people that are aberrated. There's no competition. There's no wanting to beat the other fellow. There's wanting to share ideas with other people. That's what makes progress, the sharing of ideas, not keeping them to yourself.
In Engineers in the Price System, Thorsten Veblen talks about, that's a book by Thorsten Veblen, talks about the need to include the industrial system in order to create a social change. Do the first cities implement a new industrial system to overcome the old ones? Or does the old system need to be on board to be able to come to a resource-based economy?
I don't know, because Veblen never specifically laid out how the system operates or how goods and services are produced on a vast scale, or how to take care of people's health both mentally and physically. No definite information has been supplied. It's just like saying, you know, the world ought to live together in peace and harmony. That would be wonderful. But how do you do that? That's what's missing.
Do you suggest there being a universal language in a resource-based economy?
Yes, the language has to be different than the language we use today. All language is subject to interpretation. When you read the Bible, you come up with, I think Jesus meant this, and other persons know he meant that. So you have the Lutheran, the Seventh-day Adventist, the jumpers for Jesus. You have that because it's subject to interpretation. We need a language that's not subject to interpretation, like mathematics, chemistry, physics, engineering. When engineers talk to each other, they don't say, gee, I think he means this, or I think he means that. They know exactly what he means.
Do you not fear if a test city is implemented, for example, in Venezuela, that the country such as America will consider this a threat and find a way to attack that country?
They will, unless we make a motion picture. The motion picture shows that only when all countries work together and do away with armament and share ideas with one another and share the Earth's resources with one another. When few countries control most of the Earth's resources, you will always have problems, always have war, stealing, serial killers. All those problems are generated by culture. I know I don't have the time to go into all the detail that I'd like to go into, but I'm going to tell you again that if you were brought up by the headhunters of the Amazon, you'd be a headhunter. If there's no other information available, and as long as a culture closes its borders and tries to tell you that you live in the best country in the world, that Germany is the best country, that France is the best country, that America is the best country, you're dividing up people, you're separating people from understanding and realizing certain aspects of life and our relationship to nature.
Okay, if we want to build a Venus Project prototype city in our country, would you help us? If it is a Venus Project city, it would have to go through the Venus Project. The Venus Project would have to initiate it with that country.
Yes, it cannot be used to aggrandize any particular nation, because I feel people from all over the world have made major contributions to the well-being of all other people. Therefore, honoring any one country is not the best way to go. It's making things available to people, the best in education, the best in healthcare, the best in nutrition, and a relevant education.
If we forget about weapons in our society, and after a couple of centuries we get visited or come across hostile alien species,
what do you do?
Is it wise to be defenseless?
Yes, it is. Because anything that can travel 100 million light years through space is not somebody you're going to win over. You can't win a battle with anybody that's that far advanced. And besides, if they are advanced, they can get all the energy they need from the sun. They don't have to tackle your little power lines or steal your resources. They can use nanotechnology and make any material they want to make. They don't have to conquer you. That's an old scarcity behavior, conquering nature. We don't want to conquer nature. We want to study nature and learn to live in accordance with natural law. What we want to do is eventually learn how to control hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and minimize the damage of those natural systems. When a person tells me they're nature lovers, I say, you mean you like earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis? Of course no one's a nature lover. You like certain things about nature. Once you get to understand those things, your whole outlook changes. Schools do not teach you how to think or reason or how to find meaning in your life. They teach you how to become a member of a certain profession, like lawyer or business administration, which are useless professions that were good 100 years ago. They no longer relate. They're dangerous today.
This person asked a couple of times, why are there computer screens around the central globe, center computer system? Why not directed light or glasses or contactless. The model that we made was made over 30 years ago of the central dome that's still being passed around. It would be very different in a film. It would be updated, all that technology. A lot of the drawings that you see that we have even on our website, Jacque designed over 60, 70 years ago, and they haven't come to it yet, but it would be changed in any type of format like a major film. Is the resource-based economy most important aspect of the Venus Project?
No, the whole system has to be integrated into a working reality. There's no single area of the Venus Project that's most important.
Why is the Venus Project brand of a resource-based economy to be preferred over such brands as a Resource-Based Economy Foundation, New Zealand Project, Atlas Project? First of all, a resource-based economy and all the aspects of the resource-based economy were from Jacque's work. The name was coined by Jacque, and from his over 75 years of work. These other projects took parts of Jacque's work and incorporated them into their own projections of what they thought it was and into existing structures of today, and they're calling themselves a resource-based economy and saying that they're doing some of the work of the Venus Project. They aren't. So it's not just another brand, it's the origin of the work of the compilation of the resource-based economy. And if you want to learn about it, it deals across the board of all aspects of society. How do you communicate ideas to others without them projecting into what you've said?
You can't stop that, people. No matter what you come up with, no matter what you believe in, there will be people that hate you. If you're a Catholic, people will hate you. If you're a Jew, people will hate you. If you're an agnostic or an atheist, people will hate you. And if you're religion, there's a group of people that will hate you. You cannot stop that. That has to do with their background. Unless they come to you and say, what do you think of different values and different beliefs? Then you can address that. But if they come to you saying that this is the only way, if I use that kind of expression, if I say the Venus Project is the only way, I'm saying it's the only way we know of. But if you have some other ideas, please bring them forth so we can utilize them.
How do you help people to perceive their own cultural indoctrination without making them angry? We're reviewing some of these sentences.
Well, you have to do a survey of people and what causes them to respond that way. And you have to learn mentally how to reach different types of people with different value systems. For example, if I wish to change religious people, I start out with the Bible, where they say that God is omnipotent, all-loving, all-caring. Then when he told Noah to build an ark, he said he's going to flood everybody out. That seems to be contradictory. If God was going to flood everybody out and kill all animals, all children, and all the people that he so-called created, then that doesn't make him all-loving and all-knowing and all-kindness. So you have to find the contradictions, and if the contradictions are not answered, you have to surrender those values in relation to values that coincide with the real physical reality. I don't like the idea of God sending his son down to the earth to tell people about the existence of God. God doesn't have to send his son down. He can make people aware of that right away, since he's omnipotent and knows everything. I don't like the stories in the Bible. They seem childish and infantile concepts of God. They're not advanced concepts of God. The concepts of God I read about in the Bible, he's a jealous God. He's an angry God. This doesn't make sense to me. It isn't God that man is talking about. It's talking about his own concepts of God.
And when people get angry, they get angry because you're threatening their value system. So if you take away their religion, then you replace it with something else, some other ways of meeting their aspirations for society. You know, introduce them to the Venus Project. Okay, do you have any tips for remaining objective as we all tend to get emotional when discussing important issues.
In other words, in order to get better knowledge and understanding of the Venus Project, check our website, read our books, and watch our videos. They will give you the tools with which to think about the future and evaluate human behavior and how to check things out. We have all that on our website, so look into it.
The question was how not to get emotional when portraying these.
You always get emotional about everything. If you find a better system, you give up the older system. That's an emotional decision. But if you can improve human ability and diminish the amount of emotions and ask, what effect will that have upon culture? What you really want is not emotions. You want solutions of problems. In other words, if your children are trapped in a car and you say, oh my God, they're trapped in the car, I can't get them out, they're going to suffer, that's emotions. But if you break the window and take the children out, that's emotions translated into an action pattern. And that's what we're mainly interested in, when all emotions become translated into an action pattern. Rather than saying, I care for people, you don't outsource jobs. You don't use soldiers to kill people. That's how you care. Other than that, it's not caring at all when you build big armies with super weapons. That's the maximum expression of human stupidity.
Jacque states that a group of people wanted to investigate ESP, and he asked them if they were qualified to investigate. What would a person qualified to start researching the Venus Project and actually contribute towards its shortcomings?
Read all you can on different experiments like communism, socialism, and why they failed, and what the failures and shortcomings are of the free enterprise system. Become familiar with that and try to look up solutions, possible solutions of problems. Try to become familiar with most of the literature on solving social problems. Look into sociology, anthropology, and many other fields, human behavior to whatever extent you can. Of course, the study of human behavior is really the study of the environment they're reared in. You cannot dissect a person and find in the brain any answers to any problems. It only will show you regions of the brain that are concerned with speech, that are concerned with reflexes, that are concerned with digestion, that are concerned with regulatory mechanisms. You cannot find out anything about humans in dissecting the brain, but you can by looking at the culture. If you look at New York City, every building is a different size. All the windows are different. It's a system of wasted resources and extravagance beyond any intelligent comprehension. The cities that everybody gets off at 4 o'clock, your freeways are jammed. During the day, they're not. You live in a chaotic world where you don't have any system at all. It just evolves in terms of the established group.
Jacque says, start out by saying, I don't know. After a certain amount of investigation, you know enough so you can discuss a topic. How do you know you've reached that point? How do you know there isn't something huge you're missing?
And if there is, you wouldn't know about it anyway. So the things you don't know, you can't examine. In other words, nobody 500 years ago can examine the benefits of flying machines. They can't even envision them. They would envision flying machines flapping their wings like birds. That's their only reference. Don't you see that? They have no other reference. They can't picture a jet engine. If you ask an Eskimo, you can have anything you want. He can't say, I think I'd like a twin-engine Beechcraft. He can't say that. It's outside of his frame of reference. So when you say, what do you do about the things we don't know? You don't know them, so you can't do anything about them.
Okay, Jacque says when meeting somebody, he asks them certain questions. By their answers, he can tell how long it takes to turn them around. What does this mean by turning them around? Which questions do you ask? Do you have questions differ depending on the observation made? You want to talk about that?
I ask different questions of different people to find out how attached they are or how influenced they were by the culture they live in. Then I approach them on the basis that I think they can understand within the realm of their value system and gradually take them from system A to system B to system C. I take them as fast as they can go, but always start in with identification with their value system. For example, when the head of the Ku Klux Klan said to me, "Jacque, you're a smart guy. What do you think of the Ku Klux Klan?" I said, "It's a great organization, but it doesn't go far enough. That gets their ear. If you attack, you lose them. Do you understand that? And if you don't, you better think about it a lot until you do."
How do you know not to bother with a certain person?
Well, if the person comes up with answers like, if I were to say to a person, "Who do you admire more than anyone in the world?" And they say, "One Punch Malone. He knocked a guy out in one punch." That's a very limited mentality. It might take 10 years to turn that person around. So I say it's not worth it. I'd rather use my time on people that are part of the way there. That's how I make my decisions. Are they right? That I don't know, but I know it takes a very long time to turn a person around from One Punch Malone.
Also, when we meet different people, we also ask them if they had millions and millions of dollars, what would you do with it? And if they say they'll buy high-class hotels and make more money, and you know what the person's like. You know there's certain things you can't talk to them about if they have no social concern at all. And also ask people what books they read or what's their favorite movies, and you can get a certain idea of their general value system.
But what they believe in and what they uphold. That people are always telling you what they believe in by their conversation. They tell you what the major influences have been in their environment. Even if they ask them questions, they will tell you. If you ask an Eskimo, "What is heaven like?" he says, "There's lots of seals, there's good hunting, and there's no scarcity." If you ask an American Indian what heaven is like, he says it's a happy hunting ground, lots of animals, plenty of animals to hunt, no scarcity. It's always within their culture. If you don't know that by now, you have a long way to go and a long way to explore. People always reflect their culture, unless they've traveled all over the world and have studied different cultures.
Many promoters of the Venus Project encounter a response similar to prove that it works. It seems likely that the Venus Project will be unsuccessful in gaining public support without demonstrating a resource-based economy is actually possible.
That's what the tours are for.
Why would you focus your efforts on convincing the entire world instead of creating an isolated, self-sufficient nation for those who already share your passion? We are working on all those things. We don't have the finances to do that, but we are working in all those areas. We're constantly trying to get people interested in helping to build a first city. We don't want a type of a commune where we build it out of straw bale or Coke bottles. We really want to demonstrate technology working for people.
Just in case you're interested, Fresco doesn't make any decisions. He checks with the survey committee and asks them how much arable land do we have on Earth, how much existing resources exist, how many plants there are, industrial plants. That determines what the standard of living will be, not Fresco. If you don't do a survey of what the carrying capacity of the Earth is and live in accordance with the carrying capacity of the environment, you're talking through your hat. You don't know what you're talking about. So you have to rely on good sources of information in order to arrive at better sources of managing society.
Jacque, could you explain your definition of that, where you give the example of the submarine for the environment?
Can you expand on what you want to explain?
Where Jacque talks about living within the means of your environment, that if you go down in a submarine, the amount of air that you have available determines how many people you can have in the submarine, etc.
Yeah, you have to take your environment with you. If you go out into space, you have to design a suit so you can breathe, and you have to design diapers so you can defecate or urinate. He has designed methods of eating food. In space, you can't drink water out of a glass. It would just flow all through the spaceship. So you have to put water in a tube and squeeze it into your mouth. And that's what I mean by you study the environment first, then you make the arrangements for people to go out into space. That's why when the government asked scientists, can you put a man on the moon? The first thing they said is, we don't know. And the government said, what do you mean by you don't know? Well, we don't know how many G's a person can stand. So we have to whirl him around in a gadget to see when he conks out. Otherwise, we don't know what speed to launch the ship at. We can launch it so fast that it will kill all the passengers. So you have to learn how much water is used in space travel, how to design repair systems, how to measure phenomena in outer space. So they send up rockets first and take samples of the matter as it elevates into different positions. We have to do a survey first. Before we go to the moon, we send equipment out there, or we use a spectroscope to see if there's any oxygen or water out there. You can't just send people out into space without doing a survey first. So when I use the term survey, I mean in unknown areas, we have to do a survey and say we don't have enough information to send man into space yet. So we do all the survey work first, then we send people into space. And you can't say how much oxygen you need in a submarine. You have to say how many people are in the submarine. How much room do you have for water? How do you preserve food in a submarine? And why a submarine? Because it can't be detected if it's underwater. But if the enemy, so-called enemy, devises a system for detecting objects under the water, the submarine is no longer useful. In other words, a submarine is useful so long as it remains obscure to the so-called, or what you call, enemy. But if the enemy finds out how to shoot down airplanes and you're losing a lot of people, then you work toward guided missiles so you don't lose people. In other words, the whole system is so loused up in so many different areas that I don't think any problems can be solved with the means we use today, like politics. Politics is good 100 years ago, but it's no longer relevant. But I would like you to ask politicians. Ask them how you can bridge the difference between nations. They don't know. How can you grow more food for people? They don't know. They don't know anything in the physical world. So I don't know why you vote for them unless you're kept from knowing things, which I think most of our universities are not equipped to educate people. They're equipped to train you in a particular area, optics, physics, biology, structural engineering, but not the generalist. In the future, they will manufacture or train people to become generalists, so they know many different things, so they cannot be persuaded by any country to build weapons. They would ask, what are the weapons for? Other countries do not have access to resources. That's why they invade your country. How about making things available to other countries as a possible solution? That's the answer. We don't come up with answers. We come up with methods of violence.
There is a question about official spokesperson. We have no official spokespeople. There was one person that asked us if he could be an official spokesperson a long time ago, so he felt he could have more credibility with that, and we just said yes, but there ended up being a lot of problems with that along the way. So we just asked this person not to use that name. So we do not have any official spokespeople. This person also asked if we felt Steve Jobs copied the Venus Project building design. We have no idea where they got that design, although it looks similar to some of Jacque's cities in the sea. If a Brazilian government does not want to build the Venus Project resource-based economy experimental city, but me and 1,000 people with full resources want to build by themselves, we will still have the Venus Project support. Yes, if you work with us, if you have the resources in order to build it, of course, we're not just looking for governments, we're looking for anybody who can initiate this. An Ecuadorian recently developed a system to predict earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. How would you integrate that in the Venus Project?
We would automatically integrate all information that's relevant into the Venus Project. We try to keep tab on what's new by reading all new publications, from national defense systems to new construction methods, and what's new in chemistry, nanotechnology, shape memory alloys. We try to investigate everything we can and try to incorporate it into the design of the Venus Project.
Somebody asked if we would do financing for the Venus Project prototype city through a bank or other banks. No, we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do it with a loan that had to be paid back with interest or anything to that sort.
We actually have plans for a transition between the monetary system and a resource-based economy. For example, if we have 10,000 people in a community and they all chip in $10 apiece and you build a community bank, all the profits go to the center, to the community, rather than a private banking institution. It's much more efficient to buy food collectively and have food stores that belong to the entire community, and all the profits go to the community, not to any one person or a corporation or to investors. Really, it's more efficient for people to do that. Whether that bothers you because you've been brought up to hate that system, because you're brought up in a self-centered system, you got to remember the system you're brought up under tries to make you like the people that succeeded in that system.
If I were to start a promotional farm in quotes, model, independent, to let people have the touch and feel and experience of a resource-based economy, can I expect advice from the Venus Project? They would have to get in touch with us and let us know what they're talking about with a farm.
It coincides with the Venus Project's proposal.
Yes, a farm alone is not a resource-based economy, so I don't exactly know what they're talking about. Okay, this person is asking, like in looking forward with the cryonics, when you brought people back being frozen, do you think that people could be turned around?
No, it's not worth it.
How will citizens in a resource-based economy society learn the virtues of responsibility?
We don't put responsibility on people because people have moods, they have emotions, they have feelings. And if their wife leaves them and they feel depressed, they cannot carry out functions as well as machines. No matter what happens in the factory, machines still turn out automobiles, vacuum cleaners, radios, without the emotional factor. And we think that eventually, just like elevators operated automatically, they stop when you press 20, they stop exactly on the 20th floor. When humans operated elevators, they couldn't quite stop exactly on the floor. They have to make adjustments. When humans are in government, they have so many different opinions based on so many different experiences. There are no methods for clarifying the point of view. That's why you have Democrats, Republicans, socialists, communists. But in science, you don't have all those differences. You have many people that agree with fundamental principles. Although I disagree with some aspects of the Bernoulli principle, I would still say that science is the closest thing to developing areas of agreement.
Also, that's like telling people that they should learn responsibility when they each drive automobiles and teach people responsibility. That doesn't work. What we need is safe transportation where you don't have to put the responsibility on people.
You can't put responsibility on people. For example, when you put up a sign, drive carefully, slippery when wet, that's up to each driver. But if you put abrasive in the highway so it's not slippery when wet, the responsibility is taken off the person. When you make it impossible for cars to hit one another, that is the real answer, not putting responsibility on people. You want proximity devices on cars so they can't hit one another. You want to design the system so it is relatively safer than the one that existed before that. but you don't put the responsibility on people. In other words, if you don't want children hit by automobiles in the city, there are no automobiles in the city. There's a transportation system in the city designed not to hit people. It's 30 feet off the ground where people are not walking around, where they can be hit. In other words, you have to design the system so you don't have to put responsibility on people. You only put responsibility on people where you don't have an automated system that can handle the job.
How do you refer to complicated topics like abortion with physical references?
People are educated to know that the earth can support so many people, and they're brought up not to have abortions. They're brought up not to become pregnant. They're brought up to use contraceptives. They're brought up to understand that the earth can support so many people, and that if you have a population in excess of what the earth can support, you're going to have problems. If you don't do that, you will never work out the problems.
It'll create scarcity, and that's the root of our problems. Okay, it says, Roxanne, I have a question or just comment about the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist Movement cooperation. Why none ask activists, I guess that's why no one asks activists what they think about it. I would propose a survey related to the cooperation of the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist Movement organization, not for re-cooperation, but the precise insight into what activists think about it. If they invest their time in activism, they need to be considered. We really don't have a platform in the Zeitgeist Movement to say much right now, nor did we have much before this. But if people within the Zeitgeist Movement want to continue promoting the Venus Project, they can do that. We appreciate that, but don't mix up the material. For instance, if you have a brochure and you show our drawings and you take the information, the text from our website or whatever, then credit the Venus Project at the end. Put the Venus Project website there. Mention the source, but don't sign it the Zeitgeist Movement. For now, just keep all of that separate. If you have posters that have our pictures, then sign it the Venus Project, but not the Zeitgeist Movement. So this is a way that we're telling people who want to continue advocating the Venus Project within the activism of the Zeitgeist Movement that we're all for it, but just keep them separate as they're separate organizations. The Zeitgeist Movement is not the activist arm of the Venus Project now. So if you have any other ideas or suggestions or want to talk about it, we are open for it.
Let me say something about that. First of all, the Zeitgeist Movement did point out the shortcomings of our culture. They did point out the crimes by bank and Federal Reserve System. They did point out the confessions of economic hitman, which was very useful. But the Zeitgeist Movement never in its proposals laid out a system to take care of those problems. This is what I meant when I said we have nothing in common. We only have in common that this system today is very offensive. But if you don't come up with an alternative approach, you leave people in midair. It's the Venus Project that comes up with the educational system, the design of transportation, the design of cities, to use resources intelligently. All of the designs that have been proposed that may work very well for all people all over the world have not come up from the Zeitgeist Movement. That's all I'm talking about. The Zeitgeist Movement is a very definite stage in the development of people. They should learn what the shortcomings are of the pre-enterprise system and where it doesn't work. Where the Venus Project comes up with is what to do about it. Don't take my word for it. In other words, ask people of the Zeitgeist Movement, how do you prevent crime? What do you do about people that don't want to go along with the system? How do you design cities that work, and how do you know they'll work? What's the basis for your decision making? Just try asking them that, and you'll find out that they have no answers.
So question here, some of the Zeitgeist, it says some of the Z and the V concepts are outside the comfort zone of many people. So we must come up with multiple approaches to educate people about resource-based economy. This is fine. But if you come up with different approaches, swing it by us so we can see that you're really in line with what the Venus Project advocates for a resource-based economy. What's the difference between countries sharing resources in the transition and plain old barter? How do the two differ exactly? If you want to go over
In the barter system, you try to take advantage of a person by giving them less apples for bananas, or whatever advantage position you hold. The barter system does not have anything to do with a better distribution of resources. The Venus Project not only shares resources, but shares knowledge and shares architectural information, city planning, research findings. There's no patents in the Venus Project. We share ideas with everybody, but everybody is taken care of. There's no elitism of any kind, technical or otherwise.
I guess we'll wrap it up for today, and if we see something that we didn't answer, we'll try and get it next time.
Yeah, brilliant. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you, Jacque and Roxanne, for taking the time out to come and do this Q&A for everyone. We'll set up the next one for next week. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
There's a lot of talk about the world financial system collapsing, which of course everyone I think agrees that it's going to be very destructive. I would like to look for a way to see if we can bring it more to a soft landing. And I was wondering particularly if Jacque feels that that's just a waste of time, that it's inevitable that the system will collapse, or would it be worth spending time to try to figure out a way to make it come apart in a less disruptive way?
Well, as it collapses, it'll move toward military dictatorship.
He's saying, is there, sorry, I have to interpret
and
this.
only accelerate that.
Because Jacque can't hear all the words. Do you think there's a way of making it kind of a soft landing? I think the only advantage or to making it easier is if we get the word out there to more people. The broader the amount of people that know about it, the less problems there'll be.
Thank you.
How do you see all the stuff that's happening in the eastern sector, in some parts of Europe, even in the US? There are more which are going on the street and demand that they want to change into a new system, into a system that benefits the people, and not a system that forces the people to benefit it, to work for it, sorry.
When the people protest all over the world and they want a new system and they don't know what that system is or how to operate it, they will have the same problems unless you specify the new system. Specify education, what it is you're going to teach people. And the more religion you have, the more new religions you have, the more problems you're going to have. And the more opinions you invite, the more problems, unless the opinions are based upon research and actually trying to figure out how things work. If you don't do that, you will always have problems.
From what I've seen, they're saying that they want a new system, but they really want to be heard more, or more access, or I've heard too in interviews of some of the leaders of the young people in Spain, for instance, is that they're saying they want a new system, but what that means to them is to have the politicians listen to what their needs are and more voice. So they really don't know enough to advocate something different. Unfortunately, not enough of them know about the Venus Project or a resource-based economy. So they don't know what to advocate. And they'll, like Jacque said, they'll get the same problems over and over again. They'll get the people who represent the monetary interests in there. Even if not immediately, it will gradually go towards that.
Makes sense. Thank you.
You know, a scientist wrote a book once. He suggested that don't ask people what they want. Tell them what they ought to want. People don't know enough about things to know what they really want. People think they want a job to get the money to buy the things they want. They don't want a job. They want access to things. A job is in the way. It's a pain in the ass. It's not pleasant at all. So why do you want a job? What you want is access to the things you want. And once you get that across to people and teach them what they ought to want, what they really want, they don't even know how to state the problem today. They're brought up without the language, without the knowledge of what to want. So they think they want a job. They don't want a job. They want access to things. Think about what I'm saying.
I have a question. Imagine we get to a resource-based economy and finally everything is automatized and you're no longer restrained by things like this society, so you can do anything you want. What would you do?
You don't have people brought up to do anything they want. They would be killing each other. They did anything they want. They have to do things that promote sustainability. That's what education means. Education means you show people, if you kill people and they come back and kill you, you can't without training people or educating them as to what will promote survival.
There'll never be a time where we arrived at the place in society, we've reached it. People will always have not so much problems, but they'll always have things that they want to solve. They'll always have, immediately, they'll always have problems. We have problems such as heart disease, cystic fibrosis, tsunamis, all sorts of things that people need to solve and need to work on. We'll never reach a state where we can sit back and say, we've made it. That would be death. So our values will be very different in the future, and what we work on is very different, and what we tackle and to conquer and to do would be very different, but there'll be always new challenges.
Well, I would think that the honest thing to say is that once we get all the problems, we become the state where we no longer have to worry about the food, about living anymore. We would be immortal biologically. Then what would concern us? I would say, well, no. For me, it's a mystery.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Jacque, I would like to say that the machines can act like us. They will get bored with repetitive work, and they also can have feelings. If we build these things with new electronic component called memristor, or if we base these robots in some kind of emulation of the human brain, they will behave exactly like a human being.
They don't get hungry. They don't get hungry. Machines don't care. Machines don't have ambition. They don't feel overworked. They don't feel anything. But you can generate machines to look like they feel. You can generate images of people that move and talk with great sympathy, but they will not feel. It's just like a movie actor. He acts like something, there's been a terrible earthquake and he lost his family, but it's only acting. A movie actor doesn't feel the loss of a family. Do you know what I mean? When he acts a part. The same with machines. They can simulate all kinds of conditions, but they do not feel. Machines do not have a reaction. If you work your computer Saturday, Sunday, Monday, it doesn't say, give me a break, give me a day off, will you bastard? You work me all the time. Machines don't feel, isn't that obvious?
I think what he meant was that exactly like you said it, if it's wanted that machines produce something that looks like a human feeling. For example, if you are in an automated restaurant and the automated waiter comes to you and she has to look like or if you want her to look like a girl, then she can behave like that through the modern technology. But if it's not wanted, if you have a crane and it has to pull a load up high in the air, it does not have to look like a human. And yeah, I think that sometimes people get confused by it. They see new technology and think that the system that can copy a human feeling already has this human feeling, but it's not that way. It's like, or of course, it's like you said, they don't have feelings. And people sometimes mix it up because it looks like it, but it's not the case.
Yes, that's correct. We're going to have to go, sorry, but we'll continue this, I guess, next week then. We really appreciate all of you coming in to the TeamSpeak for this.
Yeah, brilliant. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you, Jacque and Roxanne, for taking the time out to come and do this Q&A for everyone. We'll set up the next one for next week. Thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much.